Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be picking up the same idea of the envelope and a little bit with notional space, except the difference with it this time is we're going to be using 2 objects, 3 objects, some of you might even attempt 4. So we're going to look at the same process, but now how do we group more than one object together? So some of the things that I talked about in the last video, we talked about a stick for sighting. That's so important to have. If you have something longer than a pencil is preferable. So if you have something like this, a shish kebab stick, you can buy a whole box of these. I would do that. Or a knitting needle or something long and straight, longer than a pencil. So we're going to need this, as you know, when we look at the still life. As all of you should know by now, we start off with our highest point. So the bear is the highest. And we're going to take notice to our shapes. The bear is a triangle. So you want to notice that if you reduced them to a simple shape, that's what he would be. More so than a cylinder or a rectangle, it'd be a triangle. However, now we've got the apple to deal with. So now our envelope, we're starting with our highest, and we're going to be coming around this way. And then I got to come up with a thickness. And then I also have to get this line. What is the line? That's, if there was an invisible line drawn on the table of the objects you're drawing, what is that? Is it horizontal, diagonal? What is it? That's going to become really important because it gives us a relationship of these two. And then, of course, this is going to come up. So with that in mind, we're going to start it that way. And I'm going to start off with my central line. And we'll just establish where that is. And for me, from your perspective is a little different than mine. Mine, I'm looking at it pretty much straight on for the bottom of this thing. But now is what's important is the top of its head. So I'm just going to make a mark up there, roughly how wide. That's all. And then I'm going to lay my stick at this angle, because if it was in a tight sheet, that's exactly what would happen. And I can transfer that angle. And I'm going to get something like this. And coming on an angle like that, if I transfer it, it should be pretty accurate, and it's not. So I got to double check and make sure my angle works. Okay, so looks like it wants to come out a little bit further, not much. So now I've got the bottom. Now I'm going to determine the bottom. So I'm going to go, say, the bottom of this apple. I'm going to take it to here. And I'm going to go from apple to the character's foot. And there's a slight angle to it going this way for me. So it's an angle about like that. And now I'm going to take this general line and go from the side of his head and run it out to his foot. Okay. So there's our general envelope grouping in our objects. This would become a little straighter. And so let's see if it changed my line a little, because I think that's what was throwing me off. It certainly was. I didn't have this angle of the side of the apple to deal with. Okay, so that's better. Now, this is technically known as the envelope. Now, what happens is the gesture within. So you can measure the major divide. When I measure from the triangle between his legs and I come up, I get that it's halfway. So I have, this was his legs, or at least this was one leg. If I go for the other, I would have to go for this angle that's existing here. So what is that for me? And so it would be roughly like this, and that would be in there. So if now I'm guessing at the spot between his legs is up a little bit higher, again, all of this is guessing. I'm going to divide this in half because his head is half of that length. Measure it. I can measure it from back here. I can just outstretch my arm. That's rather close. And then I can proceed with a shape. So you're going to put a shape within the envelope. And if it all goes well, these should be the edges, right? And then you do that, and then I come up with a loose feeling of where is his body. And then I'll come up with roughly maybe how high his leg might be here, how high it might be here. I'd have to watch that there's a slight angle this way and a slight angle this way, and you place those things in. The apple, I wanted to sketch that in first because the apple is coming almost as high as that is, as his leg. It's never usually a good policy to run these lines exactly together. So is what I'm going to do is maybe take it a little, I got to decide to go a little higher or lower. I'm going to go a little lower. So I'm going to do this with it, and I'm going to watch the angles to the apple. So here it's a little bit more on an angle, which makes it a little more interesting. And then I will block out these shapes. Okay. So I'm going to place in the apple like that. It should touch this point. That's, of course, the purpose of trying to set these things up like this. The leg, I'm going to now put here. I want the apple, I'm going to keep it just a little bit above, let's say. And then I've got this leg moving down just ever so slightly. Let's do it like this. This leg now is going to come out. This point should hit. And so he'll be in there. This will come down, and then we can generalize and watch our simple distances. And then this arm can simply move out and around. I'm going to bring this leg up just a little higher. Put a little more of an angle to him, maybe going this way. That looks better. Okay, and then with his last arm, we keep watching points. It's all about relationships. Where does the arm hit the top of the apple? For me, it's about here. So watch negative spaces. We'll be talking a little more about negative spaces, but negative space is this space. What is, if I get this space right, then you've got the relationship between these things right. And eventually there's things like concave and convex lines, as we talk much about with our gesture. Anyways, then, of course, with our gesture, you can break down the inside parts. Feel free to do that. So place in this, place in, if you're doing something like this, place in where are these eyes coming in. Watch the angle that an eye might sit on in light of the angle of the head, right? And then if there's an ear stuck on there, what is its general characteristic? That would go out beyond my envelope because I use the head. And don't be afraid to do that. We do that with the envelope all the time. We chop off little things that might be there. So anyways, envelope, two objects, top of the apple going in this direction, stem would move out a little beyond, and then all the rest is details within. I could refine this a little bit more to get the shape of the apple. So the whole idea of the envelope, of course, is to get a relationship between this and this. And the relationship of this to here are the angles, right? I can check them. I can go back and put this up against it, and they look quite accurate. You can check them and double check them. So the gesture is within this structure. It's a little more refined than the first gestures we just whipped out without this, but now it's going to put it in context of something. So what I'm going to do is move on to three objects. With our three objects, I'm going to put a little sculpture in there. And I will put maybe something set up in that sense. Okay. So, is what I'm trying to do, and with the arrangement, unfortunately in the class, I would be setting things up and arranging them for you. Unfortunately, you got to do your own arranging. So I'm trying to set them up where they're in different spaces. In other words, the apple is a little closer. This is further. And these two, of course, from my angle, this is a little closer than this. For you, it might be a little different. Remember, you can always tell by keeping a stick parallel to your eyes, taking the bottoms of those things, and checking where they're at. So I'm trying to set them up in 3 different situations. So now we've got 3 objects, and you guys can attempt the 3 with your drawings afterwards, or you can even do 4 if you want. So as we've been talking about, this is our tallest object. So we're going to start at our tallest object, and I've got to be careful with the bottom so I don't go down too low because my apple is lower. Now, what I'm going to do with this one, I know that's my highest and my biggest, but just to get a little thickness to it, and feel free to do this with things. I like to do this just to estimate maybe a little bit of its thickness. I'm just going to do this, okay, just to get a sense for its width a little bit. And then I know that that's there. And then when I look at this angle underneath, I begin to see this angle going this way. Okay, so I'm going to bring this up because that's going to mean something here. So I'm going to do that again and make sure it works. It's close. I'm going to gauge the vertical quality of the height of the apple. Okay, and then this angle, if I'm not measuring my heights, but they look close. The angle looks close, so I would do this. Okay, so now we've got that in our situation, and I'm going to go horizontally, and it puts this object a little closer than this is. So I'm trying to figure out their spaces. Okay, so this, if I've got that right, there should be an angle that exists like this in between there, and that looks pretty accurate. So I'm going to do this, and that would be pretty close. So with drawing, we're always trying to figure out, are we on a height line, are we on a width line, or a depth line? A depth line is anything that's an angle. Okay, it's a depth line going back. So this is a height, this is a depth, this is a width. So we're trying to search that out. So I could take and say roughly where is the middle of this thing. I can guess at it and say it's roughly there. And then I could take this angle for my envelope, or I could find out where this is. And I could say, so in other words, to get this angle accurate, where is it? And so I can measure that. It looks like maybe it's a little smaller than a third, but I'm going to check it out. 1, 2, it's a little smaller than a third. So let's just say somewhere in here. So I'm going to check it. 1, 2, a little smaller than a third, but I think it could be a little bigger when I measured it. So I'm going to say something like that. So then I'm going to take this angle, and we're going to do it from where you're at, and then bring it through, and that angle looks pretty close. It says that it could even be further. So I'm going to take it out to here. And then from there, I'm going to bring it down for the side of the handle this way, and just drive it all the way down to the ground. Even though it's doing this, we know that our center is there. It's probably why this one needed to come out so much further than I originally thought. So we'll do that with it. Okay. So I think that's now pretty close. So this is our envelope. Okay, that's the work in laying out the envelope. But when you're laying out the envelope, is what's wonderful about it, even though it takes a little bit of time, is what you did is got the relationships of 3 different things together. Now you use your idea with the gesture. So now I can come and think of, what is this head doing? I can just see it as a general shape at the beginning. I'll just keep it 2-dimensional. We just talked about the gesture in a very 2-dimensional way. So you could do that. And I'm going to watch his neck here. I might put in a little bit of a sense of movement to it, possibly. I'm eliminating a spear at the moment, just trying to get the thinness of all of this, and bringing this down to maybe about there. Place in those lines. Watch any variation between things with your gesture. In other words, this would circle up high, this a little lower, it might be a little angle there. So then there's a little difference from the face coming out just a little bit, like that would ultimately be in there. And then off of the spear, if this is coming this way, for me the leg jogs in just a little bit. And that comes down. Leg is wide to narrow. Watch those things. And this one in here, let's just put it. I'm going to group them together a little easier. It's getting a little lost in light of the spear. So I'm going to bring them together like that. Okay, so anyway, so there's a little bit of a negative space here is what I'm trying to get in there for you. And then the little base that he's standing on. So again, as your gesture goes, watch the angles. One angle is going this way, one angle is going back this way. So then it feels like he's standing on something. That'll give me some clues of the height of the apple. So the height of the apple is about here. So you run it, you run it through, maybe a touch lower, but I'll keep it about here. So that's there, and we know the bottom of it is here. And so now just kind of watch its angles and gesture him in. And the top of it turns a little bit to the right. So I'm going to come up with a top, and we're going to simply come up with a side and the bottom. So he's tilted like that, and the stem coming out in this direction. So it feels like he's got an angle to him. Anyways, this guy here, I'm going to come up, this was roughly our center, and this was our widest point coming across. Now when I look at it to his body, I'm just going to move my charcoal out just a little bit more, kind of wears down a little bit. So I'm just going to adjust this slightly. Or there's other ways of doing it. I could bring this down a little bit. Anyways, you want to watch the relationships and where things touch. Once we get that, we can generalize this. Once you get that, take your bottom. This is our gesture, so it's very loose. You're just trying to get these watch spaces between if you can. And the handle's coming down to here, and our edge is here. Now you can put in convex, concave lines. And our piece on the top. And our last part to the puzzle. So, again, our envelope, trying to get these points. So, if you're doing this right, this line has to hit this line. This is a parallel line to the envelope, so it hits that line. So in other words, on yours, I don't want you to just draw a group of objects and come around with lines. And this line comes way out here, and this line comes way out there, and they're not touching. This has got to hit those points. This has got to hit this point. This has got to hit this point, because that's the configuration that you're doing. Now, you might estimate things wrong. I do too. Like I can tell this is off. This would have to be taller. And it will tell me those things. And then I would go back when I'm doing the gesture. I would make this a little bit smaller and stretch this out. But in the end, the relationship should work. And we keep our gesture loose and we juggle it around for that reason. So in other words, I do not want to come back with a very refined line just yet. We juggle this around till all of these pieces are in place, even if it takes you 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Once they're all in place, we would be ready to move on to the next stage. The next stage won't be to the next video. So at this stage, it's going to stay like this, okay? So it's what I want to do is show you one last thing, and the last thing is notional space. We talked a little bit about it in our last one. I want to touch upon it with two objects. Nope. Hold on. Everybody, hold on. Thought I had this worked out, but... Okay, with our notional space. If we remember back to notional space, the notional space was dealing with, again, the height and the width of something, and then just boxing it out as a rectangle. So it's a form of measuring off a cube. And so what I would do is I would do the biggest one first. For me, this is the biggest one. This one's in front. So I would start with this. Now I could do that. We just did the pair, so what I might do, I'm going to put in, I think it'll look better if I use, well, I'll use the apple. Well, we just use the apple. Let's use the pear. Don't mind me, you guys. You'll be doing the same thing, trying to figure this out, and you'll understand what it's all about as you juggle them around, because some things work better than others. So, what happens with this now is I'm going to take the little African figure, and I'm going to place her here. And we're going to say, again, like the envelope, we're going to say this is our height, okay? And I'm going to designate this as the bottom. For me, the pair is closer, but in this configuration of notional space, we'll deal one object first and then the next object. This is where it differs a little bit from the other. So I'm going to say that's there, and this is my height. Now, what I have to figure out, what you have to figure out, is the widest point would be the knees to the height. What is that ratio? So I can measure, extend your arm, measure like I'm doing, and then go from the bottom, wherever the lowest point is, and then come up, and I get it one time, comes up about to here. So is what I'm going to do is guess at the height of the knees at the moment. But right now is what I want to do is measure my width to my height. Okay, so I want to take this and come across and come up. Would that go roughly to that point? And it's pretty close. So is what I'll do is keep it this way, and I'll make sure this is symmetrical, and it will come out a little bit further. And just to elongating always looks better than shrinking. So I'm going to err, and this is important with drawing. What direction do you want to error in? So I'm going to, because there is no perfect in what we're doing ever. So I'm going to error in being a little too long. Something looks better too long than too short. That's why I added on a little more than I thought. But feel free to decide that. Now, the next move, I have to figure out where this line is. Okay. I mean, I could box it out first and then figure it out, but I'm going to figure it out now. So I'm going to measure that leg up, and I come up. If I take it from the bottom to the top and come up, I get roughly to the top of her ears, which I would say is somewhere in through here. Okay. So I think this is going to have to come up. So if I do that, so this is going to come up a bit. So what I'm going to do is secure my edge, because notional space is coming up with a box. And now I'm going to bring this up considerably. And then I'm going to take it from the bottom and come up, and I'm going to keep it roughly here. Okay. So again, I'm erroring on this being a little too long. Okay. So we're going to do that with it. So our notional space now is the box, the rectangle. But these knees need to hit right here. The knee needs to hit right here. It has to hit the box. And so this is my top. And this is real important, as we talked about in the last video, but some people don't pick it up right away. But it is a nice way to group a group of objects. and to get something accurate. So now we know our width equals our height. If you can get that on anything you draw, may it be a person, figure, animal, you can usually gesture things in pretty accurately. So I can do that, and then I could say if this is my lowest point of the feet, I could try to estimate a little bit of where this point might be, and a little bit of where her waist is, how much lower than her knees. So somewhere maybe about as low as that, and then this may be about as low as that. So I'm just going to kind of look at a couple of things. So her feet, eventually the toes have to hit this box, okay? They have to hit that. The top of the head has to be here. So now I can loosely think about the gesture. So now we begin to do a gesture drawing. So you get a shape of a head. Now, I'm not going to measure it. You guys don't worry about it. Just gesture it. I want you, this point we need to measure out. The rest of it we're just going to go through irregardless of what happens. Okay? Just kind of trying to train your eye. So then this, I'm going to kind of watch the curve. And so just watch shapes, right? Kind of say convex, concave. This might overlap. Then there's a horizontal line in there, and then I get the feel of her body. And I'm just going to bring it all the way down. Okay. So generalize things, and this becomes a concave, as you notice, on her. And then the hips start to widen and begin to move out. Okay, so do the same thing. Just kind of come up with a general shape. Once we get to that point, I'm going to kind of try to, for myself, try to feel this out. That's this area in here. And it's because it's from there, this knee is going to begin to move out. Okay. And this is going to begin to move in. And this is going to begin to move up. I'm going to check my angles. Actually, they're pretty close, so I'm going to leave them. This needed to come down a little bit, which is nice to, again, with your gesture, just kind of loosely try to get these pieces. Because what I'm going to do is check where her foot meets the leg on a vertical line. Is what I'm doing is trying to figure out where is it, like going this way. So where does that move in? How far does it move in before it makes its change? I'm going to have to adjust the charcoal one more time before we finish this off. So that helps me determine how far in this is going to be. So if that's doing that, then I know the top of her foot is going to move in this direction. And I can try to watch this general thrust of the whole thing. Does it do that? If I ran it all the way through, does it have that feel? This one for me is a little more in perspective, so it's a little bit different. So it's coming to here, it won't come out symmetrical as much as the other one. And so we'll bring that in. And this angle is now going to be, I'm going to try to set that up. Keep checking your angles, because this is all about angle checking. And so we're going to do this with it and this with it. And then the curve of where the dress would be in here. And this one would wrap around. And this one would have a little more of a thickness. Okay. So there will be little things. But these little things can be played with. We can spend some time with the gesture playing with them. What's important is getting these relationships. So anyways, once we have that, we can loosely get the sense for our arms. And so watch the gesture. This flows to the hand. The hand bends this way. And of course, this one's going to come down. Thicken this up just a little. Thicken this up just a little. And this arm's going to parallel the leg and sits nicely in her lap. There's a slight curve to it. And a slight feel of a convex, concave character. Okay, I know the charcoal's getting dark, so you might not be able to see it well. Anyways, that's our notional space with the first object. Now I'm going to eliminate the stem, and I'm going to find the top of the pair. Now, once you have your big object in, so always start with your largest with this when you're doing a group of objects. So I can take the top of that pair and say, where is it? And it's about right here on her chest. So I'm going to do this with it. I'm going to run it through. And I'm going to say, where is the bottom of the pair? So I'm going to take the stick parallel to my eyes. And actually, it's way down here. And so there's the bottom of the pair. It's that much lower for me. So then I'm going to determine the center. And the center axis is not vertical for me. So I'm going to watch this leg and a little distance between. And the center axis line for me is like this. Okay. So I'm going to watch that axis line. And I'm going to watch now my widest points. And so my widest point, say, I'm going to guess at it first. And then I'm going to put a box around it. So if I measure the width to the height, I could take that width, measure it up, and it comes, if I had it right, it would come up to about here. And so I would do the same. I would measure this coming up, and so it says it could be a little wider. Try to make sure this is symmetrical, and it's not. So let's take it from there, and let's widen it here, let's say. And I'm going to measure, so just measure it, however long it takes you to get it. Measure it up. We're close. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Now, even though I've got this at an oblique angle, I can box it out vertical, right? I mean, I could do this. So you could do that, right? I mean, you could just make a rectangle out of it. But what we know is the top of the pear has got to be here. The bottom of the pear has got to hit this edge, has to hit this edge. And then from there, we can begin to sketch. And I'm going to check my angle. Looks like it could be even a little more angled. And our top. Make it a little wider. So just adjust things till you get it. But at least you know you're adjusting it within the right frame for the object next to it. Okay? Because so many times with drawing, the perception of an object is bigger than what you think it is. Like that, it feels large. I'm going to measure that pair, and I'm going to measure it in light of the object, and I'm going to say it comes up to its chin. So I'm going to see how we've got it going. Okay, so it's not bad. It's actually fairly close. So I'm going to leave it like that. Because it's always good to measure. What I should have done before I gestured it out, and I didn't, but I should have measured the width of this to the width of this in reality. And that's always a better way. I just did it to its height, so it should be close. So if I measure from knee to knee, I go from one knee to her elbow. So basically, it goes from here to here if I've got the width right. And so that's really close. Because usually if you get the height in light of something else, you should be able to get the width pretty close to something else. So anyways, I'm going to bring that around. I might make this a little bit wider so these pieces hook up just a little better. And then the stem, this distance isn't too bad. This feels off a little bit. But they're close. And then the top of the stem ends up coming up to about here. Okay, I think is what happened. They're close, but the relationships aren't perfect. This needed to be on a stronger angle. I missed the angle. But that's the notional space. Now, with it in the two boxes, I want you to leave the boxes in yours, is what you're going to be doing. You're not going to be doing yours with charcoal. You're going to be doing these boxes with an HB pencil, and then you're going to be doing the gesture with a 2B or 6B. Okay, either 2B, 6B, and this is going to be with a harder pencil. But I want the boxes left in. I want to see what you did. I've got this sitting on a box, so you could put the relationship, because this is about relationships. I could put the relationship of the top of the box in, and I know we haven't talked about, cubes yet, but just do your best. Just run things through. Like I would run this right through, okay? I find that corner, drop it. This corner in front of me, I'll run it vertical into the pair. This is how we'll set it up. And that corner vertical is here, which means this angle then does this. So find a corner or whatever off of an object that you already have drawn. Leave your construction lines in. The other side is off of his knee, so I'm looking at that side in light of this. Okay, do it in relation to an object. Don't just put it in because it's there. Where is it in light of the object? Get your angle. This is the angle, which should be parallel to this angle. This runs through, and then this angle in front is going to come across. It should be close to being parallel to that, of course. And then it'll put it in relationship to each other and to, in other words, as you can see what it's doing, it locks them together. It locks these two objects together. So yours are going to remain real gestural like this. Do not go back and refine these drawings. These drawings shouldn't take, the time that you're spending on the drawing should be solely on the measuring. The gesture should be loose, and it's loose so that you can juggle over your lines over and over and over till you get them right. Try to follow that process of the gesture if you can, because the next stage is to lighten up all these lines with an eraser, because you're doing it with pencil. This is where we're going. And then we're going to come over with a beautiful contour line, and no one will see you're adjusting. All the relationships will be in place. So this is the loose sketch to get everything in place. Have fun experimenting with these and drawing. Do not be afraid to make marks and lines. That's why they're gestures. You can go over them and over them. And I'll see you in the next Zoom meeting.